Blessing was 23 years old, slim like a reed, with eyes that still held kindness even when her own stomach was empty. Every morning, she woke up in the small one-room apartment she shared with her younger sister, Patience, and prepared for another day of survival in Lagos. Her life was simple but hard. She worked as a shop attendant at Mama Caro's provision store in Mushin, earning barely enough to pay rent and keep Patience in secondary school. The pay was small, 30,000 naira a month, but Blessing thanked God for it because she had seen what unemployment looked like in Lagos. She had watched young people with university degrees selling sachet water in traffic. She had seen mothers begging with babies strapped to their backs. She knew her small salary was a blessing. Every morning, Blessing would pack 2 slices of bread and a boiled egg in a small nylon bag. That was her lunch. She would eat 1 slice at noon and save the rest for Patience, who would be coming home from school hungry. On her way to work, she passed through a busy junction where traders sold everything from shoes to smoked fish. The air there was thick with exhaust fumes from Danfo buses and the shouts of hawkers crying, "Buy plantain chips! Buy pure water!" But Blessing always noticed one figure that others seemed to walk past without seeing. Under the big Irako tree at the corner of the junction sat an old woman. Her wrapper was so faded you couldn't tell what color it had been originally. Her head tie was torn at the edges. Her feet were bare and cracked like dry earth after harmattan. Her face was lined with so many wrinkles that she looked like she had seen 100 rainy seasons. People called her Mama Irako because she sat under that tree every day. Children threw stones at her sometimes, laughing when she coughed. Market women hissed when she asked for water. Young men in their flashy clothes would walk past her as if she were invisible, their phones pressed to their ears, their minds on bigger things. But Blessing saw her. The first time Blessing stopped to greet Mama Irako was on a Tuesday morning. The old woman had been coughing so hard that she was bent double, her thin body shaking like a leaf in the wind. "Mama, are you all right?" Blessing had asked, kneeling beside her. The old woman had looked up with eyes that were surprisingly sharp despite her age. "Water," she had whispered. "Please, just water." Blessing had run to the nearest shop and bought a sachet of pure water with the last 20 naira in her purse, money she had been saving for transport home. She had opened the sachet carefully and held it to the old woman's lips, supporting her head gently. Mama Irako had drunk slowly, gratefully, and when she finished, she had looked at Blessing with such intensity that the younger woman felt seen in a way she had never been seen before. "What is your name, child?" the old woman had asked. "Blessing, Ma." A good name, a true name. Mama Irako had nodded slowly. "The earth will remember what you did today." Blessing had smiled, thinking it was just the grateful words of an old woman. She had no idea how prophetic those words would turn out to be. From that day on, Blessing made a habit to check on Mama Irako every morning. Sometimes she brought water. Sometimes she brought a small piece of bread. On Fridays when she got paid, she would buy akara from the woman frying bean cakes nearby and share them with the old woman. "Mama, please eat," she would say, sitting beside her on the dusty ground, not caring that her uniform was getting dirty. The other market women noticed and gossiped. "See this girl, oh," they would say. "She doesn't even have food for herself, but she's feeding that useless old woman. Maybe she's doing it for ritual," one would suggest darkly. "Or maybe she's just foolish," another would add, and they would laugh. But Blessing didn't care what they said. Her late mother had taught her, "My daughter, whenever you have even a little, share with someone who has nothing. God sees the heart that gives when it's hard to give." Far from the dusty streets of Mushin, in the heart of Lekki Phase 1, lived a man named Chukwemeka. His friends called him Emeka. He was 32 years old, tall and handsome, with the kind of confidence that comes from success and money. Emeka owned a thriving logistics company, Chuckx Logistics, that handled deliveries for some of Lagos's biggest businesses. He drove a black Range Rover, lived in a 4-bedroom apartment with a view of the water, and wore watches that cost more than some people earned in a year. To the outside world, Emeka had everything. But inside, where no one could see, there was a hollow space that all his money couldn't fill. He had not seen his mother in 3 years. 3 years ago, After a terrible argument about his lifestyle and his choice of friends, Emeka had said words he couldn't take back. "Mama, I'm a grown man. I don't need you controlling my life anymore. I made my own money. I don't owe you anything." His mother had looked at him with tears in her eyes and said quietly, "One day, my son, you will understand that money is not everything. One day, you will need something that cannot be bought." He had stormed out of her small house in Mushin, and he had not returned. His mother had called him many times in the first few months. He would see Mama flashing on his screen and silence the phone. She sent messages through relatives. "Please come home. Let's talk." He ignored them all. Eventually, the calls stopped coming. Emeka told himself he was fine. He threw himself into his business, into making more money, into proving that he didn't need anyone. He dated beautiful women who liked expensive restaurants and foreign trips. He bought a bigger car. He moved to a better apartment. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the city lights glittered outside his window like distant stars, he would sometimes remember his mother's face. He would remember her cooking in their small kitchen, humming old worship songs. He would remember how she had sold her wrappers to pay his school fees when his father died. He would remember how she had worked as a cleaner in a school just to make sure he could go to university. And then he would push those memories away and pour himself a drink. Pride is a powerful prison. It had locked Emeka away from the one person who loved him unconditionally, and he had thrown away the key. It happened on a Monday morning during the rainy season. Blessing was running late. The rain had started at 5 a.m., heavy and relentless, turning the streets into rivers. The bus she usually took had broken down, and she'd had to walk part of the way, arriving at the junction soaking wet and shivering. She almost walked past Mama Irako that morning. Almost. But something made her stop. The old woman wasn't sitting in her usual position. She was lying on her side on the wet ground, her wrapper soaked, her body barely moving. "Mama." Blessing dropped her bag and ran to her. "Mama Iroko." The old woman's eyes fluttered open. Her lips were pale. Her breathing was shallow like a bird trying to catch air. "Help," she whispered. "Please." Blessing looked around frantically. The junction was busy with people hurrying past under umbrellas, focused on getting to their own destinations. No one was stopping. "Please," Blessing called out to a man passing by. "Help me. This woman is sick." The man glanced over, saw Mama Irako's ragged clothes, and hurried on. "She's probably just drunk," a market woman said dismissively. "Or she's pretending so someone will give her money," another added. Blessing felt anger rise in her chest, but she didn't have time for it. She knelt beside Mama Irako and made a decision. She called the only person she knew who had a car, her former secondary school classmate, Tund, who drove a taxi. "Tund, please. I need help." An old woman collapsed at the junction. "Can you come quickly?" "Blessing, I'm already carrying passengers." "Tund, please. I'm begging you. She's going to die." Something in her voice must have convinced him because 20 minutes later, a yellow taxi pulled up beside the Irako tree. Tund helped Blessing lift Mama Irako into the back seat. The old woman was as light as a child, her bones sharp beneath her skin. "Where are we taking her?" Tund asked. "The general hospital. The nearest one." "Blessing, hospital costs money. Do you have?" "I'll find it. Just drive, please." At the hospital, the nurses took one look at Mama Irako and immediately began working on her. They moved her to a bed, started in 4, checked her vital signs. A young doctor approached Blessing. "Are you her daughter?" "No, sir. I found her." The doctor studied her for a moment. "She's severely malnourished and dehydrated. She also has pneumonia. If you hadn't brought her when you did, she would have died." The words hit Blessing like a physical blow. "Died? What does she need?" Blessing asked. "Treatment, food, rest, and someone to pay the bill." The doctor's tone wasn't unkind, just practical. Blessing swallowed hard. "How much?" "For admission, initial treatment, and medication, at least 50,000 naira. More if complications arise." 50,000 naira. That was almost 2 months of Blessing's salary. She looked through the window at Mama Irako lying on the hospital bed, an oxygen mask over her face. The old woman who sat under the Irako tree. The one nobody cared about. The one who might die alone. Blessing opened her purse and counted the money inside. 23,000 naira, her rent money for the month. Money she'd been carefully saving. I have 23,000 now, she told the doctor. Please start the treatment. I'll bring the rest. The doctor nodded. All right, we'll start. But you need to settle the balance within 3 days. As the hospital staff wheeled Mama Irako away to the ward, Blessing sat on the hard plastic chair in the waiting room and let herself cry. Not loud, dramatic tears, but quiet ones that rolled down her cheeks like rain on glass. She had just given away her rent money. Her landlord would knock on her door in 2 weeks. Patients needed school fees. They barely had enough food. But when she looked up and saw Mama Irako's face through the ward window, peaceful now, breathing steadily with the help of oxygen, Blessing knew she had made the right choice. God, she whispered, I don't know how, but please help me. For 3 days, Blessing practically lived at the hospital. She would go to work in the morning, rush to the hospital during her lunch break, and stay there after work until visiting hours ended. She brought soup in a flask, feeding Mama Irako spoon by spoon. She wiped her face with a damp cloth. She sat beside the bed and talked to her, even when the old woman was too weak to respond. Mama, she would say, you have to get better. When you're strong, I'll take you to my house. You don't have to sleep under that tree anymore. You can stay with me and patience. It's just 1 room, but we'll manage. On the 3rd day, Mama Irako finally opened her eyes fully. They were clear now, no longer glazed with fever. She looked at Blessing and smiled, a small, sad smile. Child, she whispered, why are you doing this? Because you're my mother now, Blessing said simply. Everyone needs a mother. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. I had a son once. Where is he? Gone. He left 3 years ago. Said he didn't need me anymore. Said I was controlling his life. Her voice broke. I haven't seen him since. Blessing felt her heart constrict. Mama, I'm sure he'll come back. Maybe he's just confused. Or maybe, Mama Irako said quietly, maybe God took him away so I could find a daughter. They held hands, 2 people the world had overlooked, finding family in each other. That evening, as Blessing was preparing to leave, a nurse approached her. The doctor says she's improving fast. It's a miracle, really. She should have died. Thank God, Blessing whispered. There's one problem, though. The remaining balance. It's now 35,000 naira with the additional medications. Blessing's heart sank. She had no idea where she would get that kind of money. That night, she lay awake on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. Patience was sleeping beside her, breathing softly. Blessing reached over and gently touched her sister's hair. I'm sorry, she whispered. If we get evicted, I'm sorry. But even as she said it, she knew she would make the same choice again. Emeka was having a terrible week. His biggest client had just canceled a major contract. His accountant had discovered irregularities in the books. Someone had been stealing from the company. His girlfriend had broken up with him after finding out he was also seeing her friend. On Friday morning, his driver called in sick, so Emeka had to drive himself. He was heading to a meeting in Festac, and his GPS took him through unfamiliar streets in Mushin that he used to know but had avoided for 3 years. As he waited at the traffic light near the Irako tree junction, something caught his eye. Through the dusty windscreen, he saw the tree, the exact tree where he used to buy Accra as a child. His mother would bring him here after school, and they would sit under that tree eating hot bean cakes wrapped in old newspaper. The memory hit him like a punch. He looked closer at the tree. There was a woman sitting there. No, lying there. Old. Ragged. For a moment, just one terrible, heart-stopping moment, something about the shape of her face looked familiar. The light turned green. Horns blared behind him. He drove forward, but his hands were shaking on the steering wheel. It couldn't be. It couldn't be his mother. His mother lived in a decent house in Mushin. She wasn't a street beggar. But doubt had entered his mind like a seed, and it began to grow. At the meeting, he couldn't concentrate. The clients were talking about logistics and delivery schedules, but all he could think about was that shape under the tree. After the meeting, instead of going back to his office, Emeka drove back to the junction. He parked his Range Rover across the street. not caring that it looked completely out of place in the neighborhood. He walked to the Irako tree. The woman who had been lying there was gone. There were just some old wrappers and a broken slipper. "Excuse me," he called to a young girl selling oranges nearby. "The old woman who sits here, where is she?" The girl shrugged. "Mama Irako? I don't know. She hasn't been here for some days now. Some people said she died. Some said a girl took her to the hospital." "Which hospital?" "I don't know. Ask Mama Blessing. She's the one who always helps Mama Irako." "Who is Mama Blessing?" "The girl who works at the provision store. Over there." She pointed. Emeka walked to the provision store, his expensive shoes getting dusty, his designer shirt attracting stares. He looked completely out of place. "Please," he said to the woman behind the counter. "I'm looking for someone called Blessing." Mama Karo looked him up and down suspiciously. "Why? Who are you?" I need to find out about the old woman." "Mama Irako." Mama Karo's expression softened slightly. "Ah, you know Mama Irako? That girl, Blessing, she carried that woman to the hospital with her own money. She's been spending everything on her. Even used her rent money, I heard." Emeka felt something twist in his chest. "Which hospital?" "Mushin General Hospital." Emeka practically ran back to his car. The Mushin General Hospital was crowded and loud. Emeka walked through the corridors, feeling like he was in a dream. He found the ward, showed his ID, and was directed to a bed near the window. And there she was, his mother. She looked so small on the hospital bed, so thin, so old. Her hair was completely gray now. Her face was lined with suffering. But it was her. It was his mama. Emeka's legs gave way. He sank into the chair beside the bed, unable to speak, unable to breathe. "Mama," he finally whispered. The old woman's eyes opened slowly. She looked at him, and for a moment, there was no recognition. Then her eyes widened. "Chukwamika. Mama, what happened? Why? Why were you under that tree? Where's your house? Why didn't you call me?" The old woman looked away. "I called you many times. You didn't answer. After a while, I stopped calling." "But your house?" "I lost it," she said simply. "After you left, I got sick. I couldn't work. I couldn't pay rent. The landlord threw me out. I had nowhere to go." Emeka felt like he was being crushed by an invisible weight. "Why didn't you tell me? Would you have answered?" He had no response to that because they both knew the answer. "For 3 years," his mother continued quietly, "I've been living on the streets, eating from dustbins, sleeping under that tree, asking strangers for water. And nobody cared. Nobody saw me. Except one girl. Blessing," Emeka said. "You know her?" "No. I heard about her. The woman at the shop told me." His mother smiled. A sad, beautiful smile. "That girl. She would bring me food, even when she had none for herself. She would sit with me when everyone else walked past. She brought me to this hospital with her own money. The nurses said she used her rent money." Tears rolled down the old woman's face. "A stranger, Chukwamika. A stranger showed me more love than my own son." The words were not spoken with anger or bitterness, just with truth. And truth cut deeper than any knife. Emeka covered his face with his hands. "Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was proud and stupid and—" "I know," his mother said gently. "Pride is a powerful thing, my son. It makes us blind. Where is she now?" "Blessing. She comes every day after work. Around 6 p.m. Emeka checked his watch. It was 5:45 p.m. "I want to meet her," he said. "I want to thank her. I want to repay." "You cannot repay kindness," his mother interrupted. "You can only honor it." At exactly 6:05 p.m., Blessing rushed into the ward, slightly breathless, carrying a small flask. She was wearing a simple blue dress and white sandals. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She wasn't wearing makeup, but her face had a natural beauty that came from a clean heart. She stopped short when she saw the well-dressed man sitting beside Mama Irako's bed. "Oh," she said softly. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you had a visitor." "Come, my daughter," Mama Irako said, smiling. "This is my son, Chukwamika." Blessing's eyes widened. "Your son? But I thought—" "He came back," the old woman said simply. Emeka stood up. For a moment, he and Blessing just looked at each other. She saw a tall, handsome man with eyes full of shame and gratitude. He saw a young woman with a face full of compassion and strength. "Thank you," Emeka said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for saving my mother, for caring for her when I failed her." Blessing shook her head quickly. "No, don't thank me. I just did what anyone should do." "But not everyone did," Emeka replied. "You did. You used your own money. Your rent money." "How did you?" "Mama Caro told me." Blessing blushed and looked down. "It's not important. What's important is that she's getting better. And now that you're here, I can stop worrying. She is family again." She moved to the bed and opened the flask, ready to feed Mama Irako. "Wait," Emeka said. "Please, let me do it." Blessing hesitated, then handed him the spoon. She watched as this wealthy, proud man carefully fed his mother, his hands shaking slightly, tears running down his cheeks. And something shifted in her heart. After that evening, everything changed. Emeka immediately settled all of Mama Irako's hospital bills and arranged for her to be transferred to a private room with better facilities. He hired a private nurse. He bought her new clothes, new slippers, everything she needed. But he also did something else. Every evening, he would come to the hospital, sit beside his mother's bed, and just talk. He told her about his business, his struggles, his loneliness. She listened, forgave, and slowly, the wall between them crumbled. And Blessing continued to visit too. At first, she came because she had formed a bond with Mama Irako. But gradually, she realized she was also coming because of Emeka. He would be there when she arrived. They would sit together, talking softly while Mama Irako slept. He asked about her life, her dreams, her struggles. She told him about patience, about trying to keep her in school, about their one-room apartment. "Why did you do it?" he asked her one evening. "Why did you spend your rent money on a stranger?" Blessing thought for a moment. "Because I could not do it. When I saw her lying there, I didn't see a stranger. I saw someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone who mattered. And I thought, if it were my mother, I would want someone to help her." Emeka looked at her with such intensity that she felt her cheeks warm. "You're rare," he said quietly. "People like you are rare." "No," she replied. "I think people like me are everywhere. We're just invisible to people like you." The words could have been insulting, but she said them so gently that they landed like truth, not accusation. Emeka nodded slowly. "You're right. I've been blind for a long time." One day, Emeka asked Blessing about her rent situation. She tried to brush it off, but he insisted. "The landlord is threatening to lock us out," she finally admitted. "I'm 2 months behind now." "How much do you owe?" "It's not your problem. Please, tell me." 60,000 naira, she whispered, ashamed. The next day, Blessing received a bank alert. 100,000 naira had been deposited into her account. The sender, Chuck X Logistics. She immediately called Emeka. "I can't accept this." "It's not a gift," he said. "It's a debt. A debt I owe you for saving the most important person in my life. Please, Blessing, let me do this." With tears in her eyes, she accepted. She paid her landlord and used the rest to buy proper food for herself and patience. As Mama Irako grew stronger, the relationship between Emeka and Blessing also grew. He would pick her up after work in his Range Rover. At first, she was uncomfortable with the attention it brought, but Emeka didn't care what people thought anymore. He took her to dinner at restaurants she had only seen in movies. He bought Patient school supplies and a new uniform. He visited their one-room apartment and didn't show any judgment, just genuine interest in their lives. And Blessing found herself falling in love. It terrified her. This man was from a different world. He had money, education, connections. She was just a shop attendant from Mushin. What would they possibly have together? But when she was with him, none of that seemed to matter. He looked at her like she was precious. He listened to her like her words had weight. He made her laugh, made her dream of possibilities she had never considered before. Mama Irako watched it all with knowing eyes and a satisfied smile. One evening, when Blessing was alone with the old woman, Mama Irako reached for her hand. "My daughter, you love him," she said. It wasn't a question. Blessing's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, but Mama, it's impossible. We're too different. Love doesn't ask about difference. It asks about truth." The old woman squeezed her hand. That boy was lost. You found him. Not just physically, you found his heart. You reminded him what matters. You showed him what real wealth looks like. I didn't do anything special. You did everything. You gave when you had nothing to give. You loved when there was no reason to love. That is the rarest gift in the world. The day came when Mama Irako was finally discharged from the hospital. Emeka had prepared everything. He had found her a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood in Mushin, close to where she used to live. He had furnished it, stocked it with food, and even hired a part-time helper to check on her. But on the day of the discharge, as they were preparing to leave, Mama Irako made an announcement. "Before we go," she said, "I want to tell you both something." Emeka and Blessing listened attentively. "For 3 years, I lived on the streets," Mama Irako began. "I could have called one of my relatives. I could have gone to the church. I could have found help. But I didn't. Do you know why?" They shook their heads. "Because I was testing God, testing people, testing my own son." She looked at Emeka. "I wanted you to find me through your own seeking, not through my begging. I wanted you to want to find me, not feel obligated to." Emeka's jaw dropped. "Mama, are you saying?" "I'm saying I chose to be under that tree. I chose to look like a beggar. I wanted to see who in this city still had a heart. And I found her." She gestured to Blessing. "This girl who had nothing gave everything. This girl who owed me nothing treated me like her own mother. And through her, my son came back to me." Tears were streaming down Blessing's face. "Mama, I didn't know. I know, child. That's exactly why it mattered. You didn't help me for a reward. You helped me because it was right. And now I want to do something." She turned to Emeka. "Chukwemeka, you love this girl." Emeka's eyes widened, but he didn't deny it. "Yes, Mama. Ido." "And you, Blessing," Mama Irako continued. "Do you love my son?" Blessing's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, Ma." The old woman smiled, a huge, joyful smile that lit up her entire face. "Then what are we waiting for? Life is short. I've wasted 3 years testing and wandering. No more wasting time. Emeka, if you want to marry this girl, marry her. You have my blessing. You have my full approval. In fact, you have my insistence." Emeka laughed through his tears. Then he turned to Blessing, dropped to one knee right there in the hospital room, and asked, "Blessing, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you the kindness you show my mother? Will you build a family with me?" Blessing covered her mouth with both hands, crying and nodding and laughing all at once. "Yes," she managed to say. "Yes, yes, yes." The nurses in the corridor heard the commotion and peeked in, smiling and clapping. Mama Irako clapped, the loudest of all. 6 months later, they married. It was the most beautiful wedding Mushin had ever seen. Not because of the expensive decorations, or the long guest list, or the elaborate cake, though all those things were there. It was beautiful because of what it represented. The victory of kindness over pride, of love over loneliness, of faith over despair. The ceremony was held at a large church in Surulere. The church was packed with people from 2 worlds, Emeka's business associates in their designer outfits, and Blessing's community from Mushin in their carefully saved Sunday best. They sat together, shared the same pews, and celebrated the same miracle. Patience was the flower girl, beaming with pride in her pink dress, the first brand-new dress she had ever owned. Mama Caro from the provision store was there, dabbing her eyes with her handkerchief. Tund, the taxi driver who had helped that rainy morning, was there, grinning from ear to ear. Even some of the market women who had mocked Blessing were there, no longer laughing, but watching with respect and a touch of shame. But the place of honor, the front row, center seat, belonged to Mama Irako. She wore a magnificent blue lace outfit with matching gelly, looking nothing like the woman who had once sat under an Irako tree in rags. She looked like a queen, which in a way she was. When Blessing walked down the aisle in her white dress, holding Mama Irako's arm, because she had no father to walk her, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. Emeka waited at the altar, looking at her with such love that people in the back rows could feel it. The pastor smiled at them. "We are gathered here today to witness something that proves God's hand is still moving. This is not just a wedding. This is a testimony of what happens when a heart remains soft in a hard world. In his sermon, he told their story, how a young woman with nothing had fed an old woman with less. How that act of kindness had led to rescue, reconciliation, and now romance. Let this be a lesson to all of us, the pastor said, his voice ringing through the church. We never know who we're helping. We never know what God is arranging. That beggar you ignore today might be carrying your breakthrough. That person you despise might be connected to your destiny. Treat everyone with dignity, because we're all valuable in God's sight. The congregation erupted in amens and applause. When it was time for the vows, Emeka spoke first. Blessing, when I met you, I was blind. I couldn't see what really mattered. I thought success was measured by my bank account, my cars, my properties. But you showed me that true wealth is measured by the size of your heart. You gave when you had nothing to give. You loved when there was no reason to love. You saved my mother, and in doing so, you saved me. His voice broke. I promise to spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. I promise to honor you, protect you, and cherish you. Not because you're my wife, but because you're my teacher, my example, my hero. Blessing was crying so hard, she could barely speak when her turn came. Emeka, she managed, I didn't help your mother expecting anything. I did it because it was right. But God gave me more than I could have ever imagined. He gave me a mother when I thought I was an orphan. He gave me a family when I thought I was alone. And he gave me you, a man who was lost but allowed himself to be found. I promise to love you, support you, and remind you every day of what truly matters. We might have come from different worlds, but now we're one. Forever. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the church exploded with joy. Drums began to beat. People danced in the aisles. Even the most dignified business executives found themselves moving to the rhythm. At the reception, Mama Irako stood to give a speech. The hall quieted immediately. I'm an old woman, she began, her voice strong and clear. I've seen many things. I have lost much and gained much. 3 years ago, I lost my son to pride. I lost my home to poverty. I lost my dignity to the streets. But God gave me something in return. He gave me a daughter. She gestured to Blessing. This girl, she didn't see an old beggar. She saw a mother. She didn't see a burden. She saw a human being worthy of care. And because of her kindness, God restored everything I had lost and gave me more besides. She turned to the audience. How many of you have walked past someone in need? How many of you have looked away from suffering because it was inconvenient? How many of you have judged people by their appearance? I was one of those people you walked past. And only one person stopped. The hall was silent now, people uncomfortable but listening. Let me tell you something about kindness, Mama Irako continued. It is not weakness. It is power. Real power. The power to change lives, to restore hope, to connect heaven and earth. My daughter-in-law had that power, and she didn't even know it. She was just being herself. A girl who remembered her own mother's teachings. A girl who kept her heart soft when the world tried to make it hard. She raised her glass. To Blessing and Chukwamika. May your home be filled with the same kindness that brought you together. May you never forget this lesson. We are all one bad day away from needing help. So help others while you can. Love fiercely. Give generously. And never, ever walk past someone in need. The hall erupted in applause and cheers. The first year of marriage was like a dream. Emeka moved Blessing and Patience into his house in Lekki. Patience had her own room for the first time in her life. A room with an actual bed, a study desk, and a bookshelf that Emeka filled with textbooks and novels. I can't believe this is real. Patience kept saying, touching the walls as if they might disappear. Blessing, too, found herself in a world she had never imagined. She had a house with multiple rooms, a kitchen with modern appliances, a bathroom with a bathtub. But more than the material things, she had something more precious. She had a husband who loved her and a mother-in-law who treated her like gold. Mama Irako had insisted on living in her own apartment. You young people need space to build your marriage, she said wisely. But I'm only a phone call away. She visited often, though, cooking for them, telling stories, teaching blessing recipes and family traditions. Emeka transformed too. The hard, proud man who had ignored his mother's calls had become someone softer, more aware, more human. He started a foundation through his company, the Mama Irako Foundation, that provided food, clothing, and shelter assistance to homeless elderly people across Lagos. Every old person on the street is someone's mother, he would say. Someone's father. We can't save everyone, but we can start. Blessing continued working at Mama Caro's provision store at first, even though Emeka said she didn't need to. I know I don't need to, she explained. But Mama Caro was kind to me when I had nothing. I can't just abandon her now that I have plenty. Eventually, though, Blessing started her own business, a small catering company that employed women from Mushin, giving them the kind of opportunity she herself had once needed. I remember hunger, she told Emeka. I remember counting naira and hoping it would be enough. I remember the shame of asking for leftover food. I never want to forget those feelings because they keep me humble and they remind me why I have to help others. Emeka looked at his wife with wonder. I won the lottery when I found you. No, she corrected with a smile. You won the lottery when you stopped looking away from suffering and started seeing people. But life is never without challenges. 2 years into their marriage, Emeka's business hit a rough patch. A major contract fell through. Several clients defaulted on payments. The economy was struggling, and logistics companies were feeling the pressure. One evening, Emeka came home looking defeated. We might have to lay off some staff, he told Blessing. I hate it, but I don't see another way. Blessing sat beside him, thinking, how much do you need to avoid the layoffs? He told her the amount. She was quiet for a long moment. I have some savings from my catering business, she said finally. Not all of it, but maybe half. And we could sell my gold jewelry, the ones you gave me for our wedding anniversary. Emeka looked at her in shock. No, absolutely not. I can't take your savings. And those jewelry pieces, they're yours. And you're mine, she replied simply. Your burden is my burden. We're not two separate people anymore, remember? We're one. When you fall, I catch you. Just like you caught me when I was struggling. Emeka pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that, she whispered. You do deserve love. You do deserve support. You made mistakes, but you learned from them. That's what matters. Together, they navigated the crisis. Blessing's savings helped. But more than that, her faith kept Emeka from despair. She would wake up early every morning and pray for their family, for the business, for their employees. And slowly, things turned around. New contracts came in. Clients began paying. Within 6 months, the business was stable again. You're my lucky charm, Emeka told Blessing. No, she corrected. I'm your partner. And partners don't believe in luck. They believe in faith, work, and standing together. 3 years into their marriage, Blessing discovered she was pregnant. She took the test 3 times to be sure, tears of joy streaming down her face with each positive result. When she told Emeka, he actually fell to his knees. Thank you, he said, looking up at her. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for believing in us. When they told Mama Irako, the old woman's face transformed with joy. A grandchild, she whispered, tears flowing freely. God has restored everything, more than everything. The pregnancy was smooth and healthy. Blessing glowed with happiness. Emeka became even more attentive, if that was possible, accompanying her to every doctor's appointment, reading parenting books, preparing the nursery himself. 9 months later, on a sunny Tuesday morning, Blessing gave birth to a baby girl. She had her mother's gentle eyes and her father's strong features. When Emeka first held his daughter, he wept openly. She's perfect, he kept saying. She's absolutely perfect. They named her Grace. Grace because their entire story was a story of grace. Unearned, unexpected, transformative grace. Grace fed grace and produced more grace. Mama Irako said when she first held her granddaughter. This child is a living testimony of what happens when kindness meets faith. When baby Grace was 6 months old, Blessing did something unexpected. She asked Emeka to drive her to the Irako Tree Junction in Mushin. Why, he asked, puzzled. You'll see. When they arrived, Blessing got out of the car, carrying Grace. She walked to the base of the Irako tree and stood there for a long moment, looking around. The tree was the same. The junction was as busy as ever. But the ground where Mama Irako used to sit was empty. An old man selling newspapers nearby recognized Blessing. "Ah, fine girl. The one who carried Mama Irako to hospital. You've become big O." "Good afternoon, Baba." Blessing greeted him respectfully. "Do you remember that day? The day I found Mama Irako here?" "How can I forget? You were running up and down, crying, begging people to help. Nobody wanted to help you, but you carried that woman yourself. People say you used your rent money to save her." "Yes, I did. And now look at you. You married well, you have baby, you have peace. God is good. God is good," Blessing agreed. "But Baba, let me tell you something. I didn't help Mama Irako because I expected God to reward me. I helped her because it was the right thing to do. The blessings I received were not payment for my kindness. They were gifts from God." The old man nodded slowly. "True talk." Blessing turned to the growing crowd that had gathered, recognizing her. "Many of you saw me that day. Some of you laughed. Some of you called me foolish. Some of you said I was wasting my money. And maybe by the world's standards, I was foolish. But let me ask you, if I hadn't helped that woman, would I be standing here today with this beautiful child and this wonderful husband? If I had walked past her like everyone else did, would my life have changed?" People shifted uncomfortably. Someone in the crowd said, "But you didn't know she was going to become your mother-in-law. You didn't know her son was rich." "Exactly," Blessing said, her voice rising with passion. "I didn't know. That's the whole point. We should help people not because of what we might get in return, but because they're human beings who deserve help. We should feed the hungry not because they might reward us, but because we know what hunger feels like. We should show kindness not as an investment, but as a calling." She paused, looking around at the faces. "Some of you are struggling right now. Some of you are one disaster away from being that person under the tree. Remember this. The way you treat others today is preparing your own future. The seeds of kindness you plant will grow into trees that provide shade when you need it most." An old woman in the crowd started clapping. Then another person joined. Then another. Soon, the entire junction was filled with applause. As Blessing walked back to the car, holding Grace, Emeka stood watching her with pride and love. This woman who had saved his mother had also saved him, showing him what it meant to truly live, to truly love, to truly see people. Years passed. Grace grew into a bright, compassionate child who loved to hear the story of how her parents met. "Tell me again about Grandma under the tree," she would beg. And Blessing would tell her, not leaving out any details, the hardship, the sacrifice, the moment of choice when she decided to give her rent money to save a stranger. "Mama, were you scared?" Grace asked once. Terrified, Blessing admitted. "I didn't know where the next month's rent would come from. I didn't know if my landlord would throw us out. I didn't know if I was making a terrible mistake. But you did it anyway." "Yes, because sometimes we have to do what's right even when we're afraid. Fear doesn't mean we stop caring. It just means we need more courage to act." Grace absorbed these lessons like water into soil. She would insist on sharing her lunch with classmates who had none. She would give her toys to children who visited from orphanages. She would save her allowance to buy food for the security guard at their gate. "She has your heart," Emeka told Blessing one evening, watching Grace feed their gardener's son some snacks. "No," Blessing corrected. "She has her own heart. We're just teaching her to listen to it." The Mama Irako Foundation grew beyond anything they had imagined. It expanded to provide not just food and shelter, but education, healthcare, and job training for vulnerable elderly people. They built a shelter in Mushin that could house 50 people. They started a program that connected elderly people with families who would sponsor them. Mama Irako herself became the face of the foundation, telling her story at fundraisers and community events. She never sugarcoated it. She spoke honestly about her pride, her mistakes, her 3 years on the streets, and her redemption through an unlikely daughter. "I had to lose everything to learn what really mattered," she would say. "Don't wait for that kind of lesson. Learn from my mistake. Value people while you have them. Give while you have something to give. Love without counting the cost." On her 70th birthday, Mama Irako gathered her family around her. Emeka, Blessing, Grace, and Patience, who was now in university studying social work, sat in the living room of the apartment Emeka had provided for his mother. "I want to tell you all something," Mama Irako began. "I'm not getting younger. One day, I will go to meet my maker. But before I do, I want you to know that I died happy. I died fulfilled. I died knowing that my suffering was not meaningless." "Mama, don't talk about dying," Emeka protested. "Hush, child. I'm old. I can talk about whatever I want." She smiled to soften her words. "What I'm trying to say is this. My time under that tree was the hardest period of my life, but it was also the most important. It taught me humility. It taught me gratitude. It taught me to see people's hearts instead of their appearances. And most importantly, it brought me a daughter." She reached for Blessing's hand. "My dear, you saved my life that day by the tree. But you did more than that. You saved my family. You saved my son from a life of emptiness and pride. You gave me a grandchild. You gave me purpose. How do I thank someone for that?" Blessing was crying now. "Mama, you don't have to thank me. You gave me a family when I was alone. You welcomed me when many mothers-in-law would have been suspicious or jealous. You love me like your own daughter. Because you're my own daughter," Mama Irako said firmly. "Not by blood, but by choice. And sometimes, chosen family is even stronger than blood family." They sat together in comfortable silence, each person reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a dusty junction under an Irako tree to this place of peace and plenty. Mama Irako lived for another 5 years after that conversation. They were good years, filled with laughter, with watching Grace grow, with sharing meals and stories and love. When she finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at 75, the funeral was attended by hundreds of people. Not just family and friends, but people whose lives had been touched by the foundation, elderly people who had been helped, young people who had been inspired by her story. At the funeral, Emeka stood to give the eulogy. His voice was steady despite his grief. "My mother taught me many things," he began. "She taught me strength when my father died. She taught me determination when we had nothing. She taught me the value of education and hard work. But the most important lesson she taught me without words. She taught me through her life." He paused, looking out of the crowd. 3 years under a tree. 3 years of being invisible to thousands of people. Only one person saw her. Only one person stopped. And that one person changed everything. He gestured to Blessing, who sat in the front row with Grace, both dressed in black. "My mother's last lesson was this. We never know who's watching. We never know whose life we might change with one act of kindness. We never know what God is preparing through our suffering or through our compassion. All we can do is remain human, remain kind, remain willing to help even when it costs us something." He looked down at his mother's coffin. "Thank you, Mama, for losing yourself so I could find myself. Thank you for being humble enough to let a stranger help you. Thank you for teaching me that pride is a prison and humility is freedom. Rest well, knowing that your legacy lives on, in the foundation, in your grandchildren, in everyone whose life you touched." As they lowered Mama Irako into the ground, a strange thing happened. A gentle breeze blew through the cemetery, carrying the scent of rain, even though the sky was clear. Several people remarked on it later. "It was like heaven was breathing," one woman said. "It was like she was saying goodbye," another added. Blessing stood at the graveside long after everyone else had left. Grace held her hand silently. "Mama," Blessing whispered to the fresh grave, "thank you for trusting me with your son. Thank you for making me part of your family. Thank you for teaching me that family is not just about blood. I promise to carry your lessons forward. I promise to teach Grace everything you taught me. I promise that your story will never be forgotten." As I walked back to the car, Grace looked up at her mother. "Mama, will you tell me the story again?" "Which story, my love?" "The story of how you met Grandma. The story of the Irako tree." Blessing smiled through her tears. "Yes, my darling. I'll tell you that story as many times as you want to hear it. Because it's not just a story about how I met your grandmother. It's a story about how God works. About how he takes our small acts of kindness and weaves them into miracles we never could have imagined. Tell me now. All right. And as they drove away from the cemetery, Blessing told the story once more. The story of a poor shop attendant who shared her bread with a homeless old woman. The story of sacrifice and faith. The story of how kindness, given freely without expectation of reward, had returned to her multiplied beyond measure. Grace Adeyemi stood at the podium of the University of Lagos Auditorium, looking out at the sea of faces. She was 30 years old now, a social worker and director of the Mama Irako Foundation, which had expanded to 6 states across Nigeria. She was giving a TED-style talk titled The Economics of Compassion. 25 years ago, she began, my mother made a decision that changed our family forever. She was earning 30,000 naira a month. Her rent was 30,000 naira. She had used her rent money to save a dying old woman she found under a tree. The audience leaned forward, captivated. By pure economic logic, my mother's decision was foolish. She made herself homeless to help a homeless person. She made her family vulnerable to help a stranger. She chose immediate sacrifice over personal security. Grace paused for effect. And yet, that foolish decision led to my mother meeting my father. It led to the restoration of a broken family. It led to the founding of a foundation that has helped over 10,000 elderly people. It led to jobs for hundreds of people. It led to me standing here talking to you today. She clicked to the next slide, which showed a photo of young Blessing feeding Mama Irako under the Irako tree. Someone had captured it on an old phone camera years ago, and it had become iconic. This is not a story about karma or cosmic rewards, Grace continued. This is a story about the interconnectedness of human lives. When we help someone, we don't just change their life. We change our own life. We change the lives of people we haven't even met yet. We start ripples that spread far beyond what we can see. Another slide appeared, showing Mama Irako in her later years, smiling with Grace as a child on her lap. My grandmother used to say, we're all one bad day away from needing help. She knew this because she had lived it. She went from being a respected woman to a street beggar. She went from having a home to sleeping under a tree. She learned that dignity is not about circumstances. It's about how we treat each other when circumstances are bad. The final slide showed the current Mama Irako Foundation building, the shelter in Mushin, and photos of elderly people being helped. So here's my challenge to you, Grace said, her voice strong and clear. Don't wait until you have plenty to be generous. Don't wait until it's convenient to be kind. Don't walk past people in need because you're too busy or too important or too afraid. My mother had almost nothing, but she gave anyway. And look what grew from that one act of kindness. She smiled. My grandmother also used to say, kindness is a seed. Plant it, and you never know what forest might grow. Well, this is the forest. She gestured to the slide showing the foundation's work. This is what one seed can become. Imagine what would happen if all of us planted seeds. Imagine the forest we could grow together. The auditorium erupted in applause. After the talk, an elderly man approached Grace. Thank you for that speech, he said. It reminded me of something I need to do. What's that, sir? Stop walking past people who need help. Stop making excuses. Start planting seeds. He smiled. Your grandmother and mother taught you well. They did, Grace agreed. And now I'm teaching others. That's how legacies work. They don't die with one person. They multiply across generations. That evening, Grace visited her mother and father. They still lived in Lekki, though in a different house now. The walls were covered with photos, Mama Irako, family gatherings, foundation events. How was the talk? Blessing asked, hugging her daughter. Good. I told them our story. It's not just our story anymore, Emeka said, joining them. It's become bigger than us. It's become a reminder to people about what really matters. They sat together on the balcony, watching the sunset over Lagos. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the same colors that had filled the sky 25 years ago when Blessing first knelt beside an old woman under an Irako tree. Do you ever regret it, Mama? Grace asked suddenly. Using your rent money that day? Blessing thought for a long moment. Not for 1 second. Yes, I was afraid. Yes, it was difficult. But Grace, some decisions are bigger than fear. Some moments require us to trust that doing the right thing will somehow work out, even when we can't see how. And it did work out, Emeka added, reaching for his wife's hand. It did, Blessing agreed. But even if it hadn't, even if I had ended up homeless myself, even if your father and I had never met, I would still have done it. Because helping Mama Irako was right regardless of the outcome. We don't do good things because we're guaranteed a reward. We do them because they're good. Grace absorbed her mother's words, storing them in her heart the way she had stored countless other lessons over the years. As the sun finally dipped below the horizon and the stars began to appear, the three of them sat in comfortable silence. A family built not on perfection, but on forgiveness. Not on wealth, but on generosity. Not on pride, but on humility. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, if you listen carefully, you might hear the whisper of an old woman's voice. Asterisk, kindness is a seed. Plant it well. Asterisk,